Welcome, everyone, to the Real Life Mages, episode 3. I am delighted to have my colleague and friend, Jessica Radiance, with me here today. Jessica, who is also known as the Rune Weaver, is a personal coach, and she teaches women how to embody radiant health through connection with nature and sound healing and soul language, to name a few. She's also a published author in The Gifts of Pain, and this is stories and strategies for insight, inspiration, and inner peace while being in times or situations of adversity. So, Jessica, welcome to Real Life Mages, and thank you for being here. Maybe just start us all off, and we'll get how to connect with you and all those details in the description, and we'll talk through that at the end. But just allowing people a moment to get to know a little bit about you, some of the highlights that you'd like to share from your life and what has brought you to this point.
Well, sure. First of all, thank you for having me. It's just at this point in life, I find so much genuine excitement in having tangible, meaningful conversations with people, and I know that that's what's going to happen here today. So thank you. My story is we've heard phrases like people will talk about they didn't choose a career path, the career path chose them, right? And we've also heard stories of like, well, it was a soul calling and I kept ignoring it and then I kept getting rerouted and I kept ignoring it and I kept getting rerouted. Those are the stories that apply to my life at this point. You know, in hindsight, looking back, realizing how everything has unfolded. And so for me, what life has looked like is in my early 20s, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease and I was told that there was no cure. And this was a really pivotal moment in my life because I didn't understand a lot of things and I kind of let this identity build my life. Over the course of 15 years, I honestly was the best chronic illness patient out there. You know, I was doing what the doctors were telling me. I was trying all of the things. I was, working. I was doing everything that I was supposed to be doing, right? And I just reached a point where everything collapsed. And when I say everything collapsed, this involves financial security. It involves a roof over my head. It involves being in relationships that were not meaningful, that were draining and devastating. Every area of my life was just falling apart. And this is where a lot of people talk about the dark night of the soul. It's like a tower moment. So the great thing is we have these core understandings that follow humanity throughout time. And you're going to hear these phrases multiple times during your life until one moment for you, it lines up and you have that understanding and that resonance. By the time I reached one of my spirals and I was like, okay, it is time for something different, truly. This is when I realized that my calling in life was to be a healer because I have walked myself through so many challenges and I have transmuted pain time and time and time again. The honest truth is that we have been taught on a societal level, so many of us, that our problems can be solved outside of us. Nothing could be farther from this. The only way you will ever find resolution to the biggest and most painful challenges in your life is when you take the time and the love and the devotion to sit down with yourself, get to know yourself, and learn how to honor yourself. When this happens, your world begins to change, and it's like you are living magic. That is kind of my overall background of how I got into the health and wellness industry. I have a lot of experience with conventional methods. I know how to help people transition through that, but I also bring a lot of magic to it. Like you said, in the forms of connection with nature, frequency, sound, things like this. So that's Jessica Radiance. the rune weaver.
Lovely. I love it. And I'm going to riff on one of the things you said here because I think it really hits home for me. And I know a lot of my audience will be able to relate to this. And one of the things you mentioned was identity. So you found yourself, as many of us do, at a point in your life where you recognized that your identity had been tied up into the diagnosis. It's different for everyone, could be a situation, a relationship, all kinds of things that we can find ourselves identifying with in quite a profound way. And then we have that moment where we realize, oh my goodness, I've been identifying through and with this for quite some time, but something inside of me is coming up. Something is coming up and it wants me to be more authentically me. So can you maybe just share a few thoughts, a few ideas for people? Because I know there's people who find themselves in this place. And when you have that realization, it can feel all of a sudden like your life doesn't fit and you're stuck. So can you share a little bit more about what tips and tricks and signals or methods that you found to be helpful as you journeyed through this identity, expansion and awareness?
Yeah. So the first thing is allowing space for all of it. So when the discomfort comes up, the first thing most people will do is push it away. They will try to turn it off, they'll try to cancel it, they'll try to drown it out, numb it, etc. And I won't go into it a whole, there's so many reasons why I think as a culture, we in particular in the Western world have developed this. Humanity on a larger scale, I have some ideas too, but we don't have the time for all of that. Learning how to build a relationship with the discomfort is the very first step. Because what happens when you don't is it will patiently wait and it will come back again. And it will keep coming back until the most inconvenient time and demand that you tend to it. Because, like everything else in our life, the part of us that feels pain, it just wants to be loved. As so many people talk about, love is the highest frequency, right? We have these concepts and these understandings, but to be able to take that and to actually apply it to the part of you that is in pain, the part of you that is uncomfortable, is a skill that not many people are taught. Like, it's unsettling. So that is the very first step, is to just give space for it at the table.
Yeah, and you mentioned that would set one up for really approaching it as an inside job, meaning instead of having this focus on, I need this thing externally to help me feel better. I need that person to validate me to help me feel better. Whatever our stories might be around that, or whatever we lean toward. You mentioned leaning in. So we're going in and we are loving those parts of ourselves that have been wounded or that just want to be embraced and want to be loved. And I think that that's a big part of what both you and I connect on as well, and what we try to help others recognize in their energetics and in their emotions and in their field. And then self-care and self-love start to dance. And
Mm-hmm.
once you offer that part of you or that aspect of you that wants to be loved, that bit of love or that bit of time or that bit of attention, whatever it is for you uniquely in your situation, then that is what moves the energy and gets it so that it's not in that constricting place anymore. So there's actually action of self-love, of self-care. And you and I could probably name tons of tools. Between the two of us, there's all different kinds of ways to take time with yourself and these energies. Although sometimes I feel that people get stuck because they look around them and maybe they don't have the support system. that they wish they had, or maybe they feel like they can't talk to anybody about it. So maybe talk to me a little bit about why it would be important to, as you're going through this and as you're recognizing this and the identity you've been tangled up in and the parts of you, the orphaned and, rejected parts of you that need this healing, why is it important to seek mentorship and support?
Mm. The simplest answer for that is that the things that we know internally, we need to hear it externally. There is a point on the journey every single time when you feel it, but you're denying it so hard. And that mechanism, I don't quite understand yet. What I do know is that it happens consistently. We have the feeling, we have the understanding, and we doubt it. So, mentorship and coaching and spaces like this are so important because, one, so the best example I can give is I have one client that I'm working with right now. The practice of journaling to even be able to give himself the space to reflect is too much for him. And so the coaching and the mentorship, what we're building right now is just the understanding of what that even feels like. And so sometimes it's a practice of having a framework for people who really don't have an idea of what it's like, what it feels like, what it can be like. The coaching and the mentorship will set up a framework that will allow you to kind of find your legs, so to say. So it's a space where you can come in, and especially I will always be a proponent of this. It's so important to work with people that you resonate with, people that you feel comfortable with, but you also know will push you to your edge because that's where the growth is. But in that space, when you feel comfortable, the job of the coach or the mentor is to actually hold that space to allow you to begin unfolding so that you can kind of then piece through, like, oh, do I value this? How do I value it? What ways do I want it to incorporate, or what ways am I ready to let it go? So having that outside observation with the experience and the training really is the way for you to learn how to let go so that you can truly build what it is that you want. That's what I would say for that question.
Yeah, I really like what you said there. I love those points because a lot of times people say, the mind will say, do X, Y, Z. But what you're saying is one tool for one person may work beautifully, but for someone else, that may not be the right fit. So having that mentorship and that kind of reflection to say, okay, that doesn't work. Let's hold space for you here while you discover what does work for you and how you can be in relationship with yourself and give yourself that powerful and potent presence that those inner aspects of you deserve. So I really like that. And I find two very similar things is that it's about the holding of the space and ensuring that you resonate with the person. It doesn't have to be, a perfect thing. There may be sometimes that you get a little upset and irritated with your mentor because they are nudging, they are pushing, they are taking you to that place. But an established mentor and someone who's working in integrity will not do that in a way that is going to hurt you. It's to challenge you and to help you see your own strength. So, definitely finding someone that you resonate with, that process feels safe, right? And having that safe space to be in. One of the things I get a lot of questions on, and I know it has kind of can be a touchy subject at times, but I want to get your weigh in on this because I think in some of your videos that you've put out, you've spoken to it really beautifully. And that has to do with the difference between being a victim, which, everyone has their experience with victimizing situations or people or circumstances, and then being in a victim mentality. So I know that can trigger a lot of people, and we sometimes walk a tightrope between the accepting ourselves as having been in a moment where there was a victim. I was a victim of this in that moment, but then how do we move forward through this without getting stuck in that mentality that holds us back? So I'd love to hear some thoughts on that from you.
I absolutely love this question. And part of it is because my own thoughts around victim mentality have shifted in since I've started doing this work. So it's going to be kind of a two-part answer. The first part is that when you are in the psychological development phase, where what you understand and what you recognize are the patterns of either you are a victim or you're not a victim. So in common culture, we run into victim blaming. And this unfortunately shows up a lot in the sphere with sexual assault. So don't blame the victim. Well, she was asking for it because of what she was wearing, et cetera, et cetera. So the thing that this does is it shows us the dialogue that we're having on a cultural level. And when we begin to understand the stories that are being told in our culture, we start to understand a lot of what we're inheriting. So from a young age, we're going through life and we're hearing this is how to be, this is how to not be, that if you want to be in good graces with your family, with your neighborhood, this is what you do, this is how you are. And we start to form our identities around this. There comes a certain point in life where we begin to understand that in a traumatic event, I'll use the sexual assault just because that's the one that I started with, where survivors of domestic violence or sexual assault, they get to a point where they're like, well, I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. So then we have this kind of language that pulls us into a sense of power, because that's the problem with victimization, is it moves you out of your power. Something happened to you, it was out of your control. The way it starts to get a little tricky is that the next part I'm going to talk about is actually our levels of consciousness. That's a lot of what I do in the work with my clients and in the stuff that I share. At a certain point, when our consciousness begins to evolve and our awareness expands, and we learn how to hold the space for being able to witness and observe our own self, something with the victim mentality happens, and we begin to realize that we have had a choice in every single experience in our life. And the reason I say that slowly is because depending on where you are in your journey, hearing that information definitely could not feel good. The reason it's important that I say it, though, is because it's part of the growth process. It's part of the trajectory. So for those who are hearing that and they're thinking, I had a choice in this, don't tell me I had a choice in this. That is different than what I was talking about in the beginning with the victim blaming. When I'm talking about having a choice, what that means is your consciousness is starting to evolve and you're realizing that you are indeed a powerful co-creator of your life. And when we start to get to this phase in our development and our evolution as individuals and as a society at whole, then we can come back through and we can look and we can say, if I had a choice in every experience in my life, no matter how uncomfortable, how unfavorable, how painful, what that means is that there is something there for me to learn. There's something there uniquely mine that is my soul's growth that would not have been present had I not needed that experience in order to transform. And I say all of that only because of my personal experience. As I mentioned before, I've been through many, many, many very deep and painful soul growth pain point moments in my life. So I'm not saying this just as someone who's read clinical research and someone who's, has the backing of the certificates or the credentials. I'm saying this as someone who has walked through this time and time and time again. Because this one has the potential to be a little heavier, for those who are still listening, what I really want to encourage you is that you're at the point now where you're hearing this and it's sinking in and you're holding it. Nurture that. lean into that. As I said at the beginning, these are the invitations. And the other thing about my work is that there are so many invitation points. And what I really help people do is learn how to recognize them. So the victim mentality is one of those really big golden opportunities to move into that. That's what I have to say about that question.
Completely a golden opportunity. Absolutely. And from my own experience as well of moving through those patterns and energies, energetically speaking, if I could just offer our audience a bit higher level view, because sometimes it does help to get out of the forest because we can feel a little triggered down in the forest by certain specific things. But when we look at the laws of the universe and we look at cause and effect, when you're able to recognize that choice that you mentioned there, not from the perspective of the actual event, right? But from the perspective of choice that has the potential and possibility to lead you into an empowered place, which frees the energy from the traumatic event. You take up the position of being the cause point instead of the position of always suffering the effects. And so then the cause point actually places you in the place of power, in the driver's seat at the head of the table for your experiences then to come. And that is where many people will find a great deal of freedom and healing from their experiences. And so, yeah, I really feel that also the mention, and I think this is so important, and I think a lot of healers and mentors and coaches sometimes miss this, and it's the invitation. It's the invitation. Because a lot of times in our traditional cultures or school systems, you're told, do this, then do this, then do this, right? And it's coming as you're being told to do it. There's not, for those interested, here are the options. And we invite you into this space. When that invitation is open, it also allows the mentor, the student, the healer, the community, and the members of the community to step forward on their own behalf, which is in their place of power, and also holding space for them to always know that they have a choice whether or not to do that. So that invitation piece, I think, is a really also a very important point in all of this. And as we evolve as humans, putting ourselves in that place of, okay, where am I telling, commanding, demanding? Where am I inviting or creating space? It's very similar to as you're doing the work with yourself, you create space and then give permission for others to do that as well. And there's a lot of energetics that are tied up into that, which get me quite excited to talk about, but I don't want to take us too far off track because I have some more questions for you. So, okay, I'm the audience. Let's put me, I'm out there listening and I'm like, wow, this Jessica, there's something about what she's saying I really like. When you invite people into the space to work with you, what would you like to say that they will get or what they can receive as a result of working in your spaces?
The feedback that I've had from the people I've worked with so far, the common thread that runs through all of them is that I have a very elevated skill of listening. And it comes across, people will be like, one client is like, oh, no, Jessica, like, you really heard me. Like, you didn't just gloss over what I was telling you, you actually understood what I was telling you, which is on one hand unfortunate because I think that so many people just want to be heard. But it also comes across, so that's, for the people who recognize it and they're like, wow, your ability to listen deeply. It also, the way it shows up is another client said, man, I got more from you in an hour than 3 months of therapy. So tangibly, it means that it's moving fast because what I'm interested in is your ultimate growth and potential. And I'm going to meet you where you are. So when you come in and you start talking about, oh, these are the things that are like getting me, and this just like these are the frustrations, or these are the like I want to know this, but I don't know how. What I'm listening to as the words and the story is coming out, I'm listening to your soul, I'm listening to your heartbeat. Because there's a disconnect sometimes. We also have been trained to like tell a story rather than to speak our desires. And so when people work with me, this is what they get. This is what they, in that space, they're getting this service. And really, the ability for this, it means that for the first time for many of my clients in their lives, they are having the spotlight put on them in a way that really allows them to see their brilliance. And something really magical happens in that moment because it's almost like they begin to understand that they actually have permission to be themselves authentically and genuinely. So that's the shortest way that I can kind of describe what's going to happen. Logistically, what this looks like is connection with nature. It looks like sound healing. It looks like a lot of different modalities and things like that. And it's just going to depend on what vibes with the person I'm working with.
Absolutely. Beautiful points. Definitely that has been my experience with you as well. I would also add, from my experience with you, your presence. You have a very authentic, potent presence that you're able to hold with the people you're supporting, at least from my experience. You've held the space for me. Now, being heard is very, very important to me, and not just being listened to, but being heard. And I don't know if it's a lot to do with I'm a Cancerian woman. You know, we're busy nurturing, we're busy taking care of things a lot of times. And when we have something to say, it is so, so valuable for us to feel heard. That's because we're not saying things unless they're really important to say. And so that is huge. And I know it's not just Cancerian women, it's a lot of people out there. And a lot of people have really never had that experience of being heard, sometimes seen, definitely not always valued, right? In the family experience or in the school system, you know, in these different environments that they find themselves in or that they were raised through, they didn't get that opportunity. And there is an element of healing that I definitely want to underscore in just feeling heard. Healing is happening when you just actually feel like someone heard you. And I love the point you made about the where you're tapping into the heart and to the soul, like you're tapping into almost like the soul's heartbeat of the expansiveness of this person, who they are in their greater being. All of them, if we imagine like the wholeness of who they are coming together, which is quite similar. And I think why you and I are a lot of times on the same page, quite similar to how I approach my tarot readings. Very, very similar to that. That's what I'm looking for when I go in there. I'm not looking for the story because we get to be very good storytellers sometimes. And I've found myself in that where I'm just repeating the story until a wise mentor or someone comes in and says, wait a minute, let's stop you right there because you're telling the story. And I've seen that happen too in traditional therapy. And not that it doesn't work for people, not that it doesn't help some people sometimes in certain circumstances, but it can be sometimes limiting where there can be a looping going on inside the story. And then the story just kind of repeats itself with different characters in different situations, but it's the same looping story over and over again. But underneath that is what you're trying to get at, which is what is the soul, what is the blueprint, the heartbeat of that person's cosmic existence and what they came here to do and who they came here to be. That's what you're listening for. And that is, it's beautiful because it's brilliant. And I wanted to use the word brilliant because I know that right now you have a program called Bring Your Brilliance. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that's going?
Bring Your Brilliance was birthed under the launching of the Gifts of Pain book that you mentioned at the beginning of this interview. The gifts of pain is going to be one tool for people and it's going to help them do something. But I wanted to offer something that was a little deeper and a little more hands-on and positive. So I decided to create a 31-day challenge, and I named it Bring Your Brilliance. During this 31-day challenge, what I knew when I started is that I was going to teach people how to transmute their pain. I mean, hello, if you've ever wanted to be an alchemist, this is the program for you. Like I said, it's not that many people want to go to their pain, but that's where our treasure is. That's where so much richness is. If we can learn the skills to move with it meaningfully. And so that's what I knew when I started the program. What I didn't know is that by the second day, I was going to be out in nature at a different location, filming the teachings, channeling the teachings. Bring Your Brilliance. Each day is approximately 10 minutes of a video teaching. It's housed on my website, so you have a little login and it is delivered daily. In addition to that, what started to happen around the seventh day is I started bringing my flutes and I started channeling sound ceremonies to anchor in the energy of the space and nature and to help shift the frequency on a visceral level. So the beauty of this is that we have the teaching component, which is going to satisfy our analytical mind. What do I do? How do I do it? Tell me, please. And then we have our subtle body that's going to be supported with these sound healings. Over the course of this challenge, I ended up creating over 30 sound healings. I think there's a total of 34. Because everyone is at a different level, not everyone is going to resonate with sound. Some of the sound healings are included in Bring Your Brilliance, but there are different packages available to access all of the sound healings or certain groupings of them. For example, there is a chakra charge that's going to go over 8 of our main energy centers, including the Zeal chakra, which not many people talk about. The Zeal chakra is often called the mouth of God. So that came out of Bring Your Brilliance. And the thing that I really learned in this was the process of trust and surrender. The fact that I was going out every day and I was just tuning in with my internal guidance and I was saying, what do I need today? What do I bring to this challenge to help others? And by day 31, there was such a beautiful synchronicity that literally brought me to tears to realize that because I had been open to doing this, even though I was scared to do it and I had resistance in the beginning. And it really just reminded me the power of opening our hearts. So on the front side, it's about transmuting your pain. On the back side, by the time you get through it, it really is a heart opening 31-day challenge. The final thing I'll say about it is that I pull in things about working with numbers differently. So I move us through 3 spirals of 9. That's why it's a 31-day program. So there's a lot there. And what's beautiful about it is if any piece of it piques your interest, I encourage you to check it out. You can always come back to it later and go a layer deeper, a spiral higher, and you will have so much there for you. So it's a really, really fantastic program, and it's going to give you a taste of how I work and what it would be like to go further and work one-to-one with me if you wanted to. But it's a really amazing program.
I love the richness that I hear in what you're describing. First of all, the ability to identify and support the subtle body is such a gift. And it was reminding me of the activation too of the parasympathetic nervous system and some of the benefits there, and the invitation into the space of trust and surrender. We can drop those words, trust and surrender, and we can easily say that and it sounds great, you know? But that alone, actually holding space in a challenge, in an event, in a community where you're really actually experiencing the process of surrendering into, that is something that to me is one of the cornerstones of healing. And that can apply to different modalities and different techniques. And then you mentioned, this is my other, I took out some really cool highlights from this, and it's about the open heart. So I always see energetically when a person's heart is open, they actually are better protected than a person who is trying to shield their heart, right? So the energetics of someone who has layers of, or even walls, heart walls up because of the pain in there that hasn't been addressed, it's behind those walls, it's behind those layers, is a much different energy signature from the signature of the open heart that has been allowed, the person has gone in, they have looked at the pain, they have transcended the pain, and their heart is open. A lot of people think that's an unsafe place to be. And that trust and surrender, ooh, that sounds scary. So I'd love for you to share if you have any kind of final thoughts about the open heart and your experience with it, whether it be personally or in your programs. And then we can talk about more about how people can reach you. So if there's any other closing thoughts, but I'd love to hear more about that open heart.
I, hearing you talk about it and get so excited, that's really what this challenge teaches, is that so we build a mechanism of stop, like when something hurts, we think preventatively I can just, do this, or symptomatically I can nurse this. But you spoke to it, and the thing is, once you know that pain is the life death life cycle, the constant churning, the constant evolution. I mean, that's the thing. We're evolving all the time. We're transforming all the time. And we dismiss it because we don't realize how magical our lives are. And that is my one hope in the work that I do, is that people begin to remember the magic in their life. By being alive, they are experiencing magic. Those mechanisms that close off and guard and protect that you were talking about, those are all preventative, and they block energy, exactly what you're saying. So the thing is, when you learn to transmute the art of, like, I know, I have trust and I have faith that whatever comes my way, genuinely, I believe this about myself, my ability, my capacity, whether it be heartbreak from relationships, whether it be disappointment in your current physical health, whether you have like too much body weight, or whether it be, a soul-sucking job. The pain can show up in so many ways, and we have so many ways that we try to control it, right? That's the other thing, the control mechanism, because we think control equals safety. It's in many ways an illusion. The open heart that you're talking about, though, and that's why the Bring Your Brilliance challenge surprised me so much, and that's why I think it's such a beautiful program. It shows you that you actually want to know what your pain points are, because when you know what comes up against that open heart and feels tender, it's that invitation, it's the calling. Let's go a little deeper. Let's find out why this is sensitive. And that energy that you're talking about is protective. That is proactive. It's not reactive. It's just that you have to get your hands dirty. You get to get in the garden. You get to do the weeding. And, what I said kind of in the beginning is, so many of us have been taught that we outsource all of this. And that's the biggest takeaway for all of us listening to this, and myself included, is that the moments where I realize that I'm outsourcing and I want someone else to do it for me, the question I really need to be asking is, why do I want someone else to do this for me? It's not that there aren't times when it's helpful or beneficial or useful to have someone do something. The importance is to know why. I mean, the best way that I can sum up everything we've talked about, I guess, is just that, like, and I'm speaking to all of you, so you listening to this are such a beautiful soul, and you have such beautiful potential, and you have the capacity to remember and embody this. And when you do, this is when you unlock radiant health. and everything else in your life transforms. And I'm so excited for what gets to unfold for you going forward. Because just this talk alone has something in it that is going to do that for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely delightful. I mean, this is just for me, and I know a lot of people that will tune into this. It has just been a delight to hear you talk about this and in such an inspiring way, and but also a real way. So I love that because we're getting that's the authenticity I'm talking about that I've always experienced with you is you're like, yeah, we're gonna get messy, but guess what? You're like a magic, beautiful, brilliant being too. So we got this. There's that empowerment factor and that freedom factor that comes in there. And it's through that journey, that beautiful, messy, fun, irritating, all of the above journey that actually brings us into our consciousness evolution and our evolution as humans and how we relate to one another. So this is the work. This is the great work to be done. So I love that, Jessica. Okay, how? So people are like, okay, yes, bring your brilliance. I want it. I want to sign up. How do they get in touch with you for that?
There are three main platforms that I'm on. So I've been talking about it on all of those. So it's at the.rune.weaver on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. So that will give you little snippets and behind the scenes on various days so you can get a feel for it that way. Those will also directly lead you to my website, which is where it's housed. The website is runeweaver at newsendler.com. It might be the Runeweaver. I'll have to double check on that. But the website is a little bit longer, but that's where everything is at.
Perfect. We'll put all those links in the description below so people can click and connect with you and reach out to you and put inquiries through, check out your website. And I know you're on YouTube as well. So that's one of the places this video will be. So people can hop over to your YouTube channel as well and get to know more about you there. Very exciting to have talked to you. I feel so grateful. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. And truly, when we talk about being the alchemist and being the magician in our lives, this is what real life mages is all about. So, Jessica, thank you so much for coming on today and speaking with us. And maybe in the future, we'll have to do another episode.
Sounds good. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.